Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week our reading is centered around the book of Acts, and today I'm joined by Alyssa Bream and Chris Rexroad, and our question today comes from the book of Acts chapter 15. So a little bit of backstory. So Acts chapter 10, which we discussed yesterday, starts an uproar in the Jewish community about the Gentiles, because suddenly they want them to live by all of the same rules that they have been living by. They want the Gentile believers, they want them to be circumcised and to stop eating certain foods and to stop doing certain things. And so it creates enough of an uproar in the church that they have the first business meeting of the church. And they bring in all of the church leaders, to Jerusalem. I think that typically this is called a council in Jerusalem, or the Jerusalem Council. And they have this meeting about what should we expect of them. And when you get toward the end, they come up with 4 things. It says it seems good to us and to the Holy Spirit. So it wasn't just the personal, there was some kind of confirmation of the Holy Spirit. And I would love to know what that was. I've heard some speculation, but I'd love to know what that confirmation was. In the traditional Pentecostal church I grew up in, I could tell you what that would have meant, but I don't know what happened. But it says this, "For it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay no greater burden on you than these few requirements. You must abstain from eating food offered to idols, from consuming blood or the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality. If you do this, you do well." So, no food offered to idols, no food with blood in it, or animals that have been strangled, and sexual immorality. They listed these 4 requirements. He said, if you do these, you're going to be fine. And everybody seemed to be okay with that. So the question I have today, because of these 4, one of them I think is still a prevalent conversation for us to have in the church. We don't have much conversation about food being offered to idols, or animals with the blood still in it, or strangled animals. But we do have conversations about sexual immorality. But the question I want to dig into today is, what are some basic rules or beliefs we should expect for churches or believers? What are some basic things that we should expect of them?
There's a lot of ways this question could go. I'll take it from the church side of things. So, when we just recently had Bishop John here from India, and there were 2 things that bothered him, and when I had lunch with him, he asked me about it. He said, "Why don't you call it Holy Communion? Why did the slide just say communion?" And then he was asking about baptism, and his view of baptism is that if you are born into a Christian family, you get baptized as a baby, and then if you convert later in life, that's when it is an adult baptism. And so I think, and those, both of those items, baptism and communion, are things that, as a staff from a lot of different denominations, a lot of different traditions, even different areas of the country, that we have had disagreements, discussions about, and probably even don't all agree on kind of how we maybe even do some of those things as a church. But those are the 2 things that I thought of that would be kind of discussed at our open door council.
Yeah, I guess if I look at this from the perspective of just helping like a new person understand the general expectations of a church or being a Christian, I would say that, actively participating in your growth with Jesus through reading your Bible, your not just attendance in church, but your participation with the church family and growing in those ways, and then doing things where you're connecting with other Christians to grow. And as you grow in your knowledge of stuff, reaching out and extending that to other people, which would be discipleship.
I was struck by this because recently in a podcast that our staff was going through on integrity, they were interviewing Tim Keller, who has passed since this podcast was recorded. And the interviewer of the podcast was asking him about what types of things what are some of the basics churches should hold to. And he referred back to this passage. He said, they kept it pretty simple. He said there were only 4 things. And he said, in modern times, he said the 4 things that I think have to be elements of a strong Christian church were, and I hope I get these right. I should have went back to my notes. But racial reconciliation, caring for the marginalized, those who are less fortunate, the sanctity of a marriage and sex inside of a marriage between only a man and a woman, and being pro-life. And he was talking specifically about the tension that brought, because 2 of those typically fall on a conservative agenda and 2 fall on a more, if you will, liberal agenda. And he said, he was saying that all 4 of those things would have been important to Jesus. And those are, and if I remember right, the caveat he said, as culture shifts, there may be other issues that we have to deal with. So if you're in a, well, even if you had gone back 50 or 100 years ago in our nation, those 4 things may be different, right? The things that you need to look for that could be changing the church. And I think that is some of what they're doing here. If we believe that these are the only 4 things that are relevant, Paul's writings later are irrelevant, because he addresses some other things. It seems to me that he is addressing things that are contextual to those people. Those churches are wrestling with these particular issues. And, for example, in you would think that incest would have been covered in sexual immorality, but he's over here having to write a letter specifically spelling out incest to the church at Corinth. He's having to address this specific issue. And so sometimes I think it's contextual, the things that you have a conversation about what you consider to be important. Recently in membership classes, and I find this with new people who are coming, that issue of marriage and sexual immorality, particularly homosexuality, seems to be at the top of the list people are asking about when they show up. And some of that is because we're not affiliated with the denomination. There's not an easy place for them to go and determine, what our stance is on those issues. And so they feel like they have to ask them. But that is a prominent issue in our culture today that we have to deal with. And I believe that would be one that would be on the table. If you said we had an open door council, that would be on the table. There are other issues that may at some point have been prominent in society. So I remember when, for example, churches took really significant stands against smoking cigarettes. Today, that is the church don't even have to address it because everybody else has. The health, science, government has all told us, hey, you're making a mistake here. Have y'all ever been to seen cigarette packs in foreign countries? Oh my gosh. So we have warning labels on them. They have pictures, like people with throat cancer and their throat's been eaten out. They make the cigarette companies put this what's on the front label.
Wow.
It's horrible pictures. I was like, how do you smoke that and look at that picture? Anyway, not to get sidetracked. I think that there probably was a time. You think about prohibition and how alcohol was an important piece of a conversation that might have been had. Today, that conversation might be around pharmaceutical legal drugs that people. You follow what I'm saying? Culture changes over time, and the issues that rise to the top might be different at different times because, like I said, the letters that Paul wrote, he addresses different situations in different places because of what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you think, since Alyssa's called it the Open Door Council, if we were having it, what that would look like?
I guess a lot of the things that our culture deals with today, you've already touched on homosexuality, but basically all of them, they keep adding to the list of them. But that and the use of the legalization of marijuana and people using it recreational, what it's doing to them physically, financially, what it could be doing to their legacy that they leave behind, or what their kids might replicate. Because as we learned from like David and Saul, I mean, your kids will look up to you and usually amplify what it is you did, and they'll take it to the next level. So if the things that you're doing now, even if they are legal, like Paul says, just because it's beneficial, or just because it's permissible, doesn't mean it's beneficial. Looking at things like that long term, is this a good thing for you to do, even though it might now be legal?
Since you brought it up, let me put you on the spot. If that was a conversation, what do you think the church's view of it should be?
I would say all signs that I've seen point towards it being destructive, physically, mentally, financially, relationally. There are some benefits, and if a person, in my opinion, I'm going to just speak for myself. If a person is needing it for a medical condition and they have a prescription from their doctor, and there's no other avenue that gives them that relief or that help, I understand. That's probably only about 3% of the cases. So, I would say that the church's stance should be that it's harmful, that it's not helpful, and that it doesn't leave you with a sober mind.
You want to weigh on pot?
Too sober to weigh in on it.
I also feel the same way about cigarettes. I don't think that there's one healthy thing that you can get out of it. It's destructive. It's legal.
Yeah, the conversation about legality and spirituality are a really complicated conversation. Legal should never determine whether we do it or not. But I do think it becomes, even though I don't think that is a prominent issue that the church would have to deal with. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got a room full of pot smokers. It certainly smelled like it one day we came to the church. But maybe it's more of a problem than I realize, and I'm just naive. But yeah, I could see that would be a conversation. Alyssa, can you think of some other topics that might be?
I don't even want to say it, but I'll say it. Women being elders.
I knew that was going to come up.
Yeah. I think it has been a conversation at times. Sometimes it's taken, when I came on staff here as a pastor, there weren't even women deacons. Women were allowed to be, they were like they were like second-class deacons.
Yeah, they were deacons' wives.
They were deacons and they had to do a whole bunch of work, but they didn't get to come to the meetings. And that got changed. And so I think that would be, that's something that there's been conversations about on different levels. And yeah, and I don't know if you even need to ask me what my opinion would be on that.
I've had your opinion, but you can share it.
I mean, I think it would be fairly obvious that I would be for women elders. I think that there's lots of examples of women being leaders in the Bible, and that it's ridiculous that we don't have any women elders.
Do you think that would be an issue of structure or of morality?
Yes.
Okay.
I think when there's decisions being made and there's not, I mean, we talk a lot about how different perspectives are good, and having different people with different views are good in a room, and to have a room that makes a lot of decisions with no women in it sometimes, yeah, just doesn't seem like maybe that's always the best, to keep women out of rooms where decisions are made.
Even though this is a staff-led church.
So then what's the problem with having...
Yeah, I'm just asking the question,
Right. So women are leading in some places, but then there's just this one little area where it's, oh, you're a woman, you can't do that. That's what makes it almost more preposterous. More like, that's a really weird line to draw.
Right.
And it just seems, not based more on tradition than on anything biblical or anything
Well,
like
I think the defense of it would be the reading, how certain verses are read, whether that's a fair reading or not is a debate that could be had, but it's not, I don't think it's a frivolous choice. It's just, it is the choice. Any other morality issues that you think would be a part of this conversation?
Well, you mentioned it before about abortion. I mean, that's been a hot topic, and it's not slowing down. In my personal opinion, it's not our right to take a life, even if it's within your own body. That's my opinion on that. I really can't see it any other way. And I have a really hard time believing that you would be honoring Christ in any way if you were saying that was okay to go and do, because the vast majority of them are usually for convenience or regret. Some of them are for medical concerns, and some of them are for because of rape and stuff like that. And I do understand those situations, but is it our right to take a life? And if we're going to get to a point where we say that's okay, where's that going to go in the rest of culture? As far as, are we going to start targeting the elderly later on, saying, no, you're too old, we won't let you have these surgeries, these medical conditions, you're just going to start what was it, Kevorkian? Was that Kevorkian back in the 80s or 90s or something, that would just basically put people to sleep?
Right.
Like we would put a dog down, And I know it's a hard topic to talk about, but honestly, I just can't see it any other way.
Any other topics of morality?
Nope, we're good. Okay. We've discussed all the topics of morality that will ever need to be discussed.
We've discussed all the ones we're going to discuss for the day. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we conclude our conversation on the book of Acts.